was Jesus between that 18 years period, and had different perspectives saying that, Jesus, the reason why it was excluded from the Bible is because they did not want us to know what he went and did during that 18 years to be able to perform stuff like miracles and be able to walk on water, turn water into wine. We keep hearing that he traveled to places like India to go in the Himalayas and meditate and be able to gain those superficial powers of doing those miracles. And hopefully you could give us some insight on how to explain this, because there's a lot of, I don't want to say conspiracy, but a lot of speculation of what transpired during that 18 years.
Yeah. What we do know is at the age of 12, the last time we see Jesus is teaching in the temple. And then we see Jesus at the age of 30 starting off his ministry in terms of performing miracles. That gap between the age of 12 to 30, Bible scholars will assume that he would have just been working with his father if his father was alive, taking care of his mother if his father did pass away, being the oldest son. But he would have been in Nazareth, pretty unknown, because when he does enter into ministry, nobody knows him. And nobody be like, hey, that's it Jesus who went quite to India and come back. Nobody knows him. They all like, oh, look, it's the carpenter's son from Nazareth. They know him to that extent, as in he was just Joseph's son from a small town in Nazareth, being a carpenter. And that's what they know him for, and they lived with him in that area. And none of the eyewitnesses, none of the first history historians would articulate anything outside of that. Because if there was evidence to support it, we would have some writings from the first century, from any historian that existed in that time outside of the Bible. Because if we want to say, well, the Bible, just leave it out because it don't fit the narrative, there are no extra biblical supports or content that says otherwise. Nothing that exists. Everything comes afterwards, thousands of years after, as assumptions or even as false information to skew people's perspective. And I firmly believe that the Bible reveals everything that we need to know. So I would also say that we don't need to know what happened between the ages of 12 to 30. It is almost irrelevant to the storyline. It is irrelevant to the ministry of Jesus Christ. And it does not change anything. Because if you want to say, well, he studied somewhere else and he gained that knowledge for somewhere else, the fact is there is no other person in history that taught the same things as Jesus, that had the same wisdom or the ability to even speak in parables the way that Jesus did. There is no other person in history that died on a cross and then over 500 eyewitnesses claimed to see him resurrected afterwards. Therefore, he is not a prodigy of someone else. Because to be a prodigy means that somebody else had to do it first. And there is no one else in history that has done what Jesus has done. So even to even suppose that possibly he learned from someone else when he only taught the Torah. He only taught Jewish scripture. There is no even quotes of Jesus that dates to some other historical artifact or some other person historically that said it. Everything he quotes, he actually quotes the Old Testament and then explains how he fulfills the New Testament in all of his teachings. Because he did not come to abolish the law, but he came to fulfill the law. So if we want to say he learned from anybody else, it would have been rabbis, and it would have been the Jewish law, and it would have been the Torah. Nothing else, really. So there isn't any evidence, solid evidence to support it. It is a lot of speculation. And the fact is that people that want to be antagonistic will believe speculation because that suits their agenda better.